Since it's got chilly again, we're going to make a bit of stew today. Very basic stew. I'm really emptying the cupboards big time now. So I've got some potatoes I've already washed and diced up. That will take about 45 minutes to an hour to be cooking, so I'll add that later. Again, some red wine. Got a Shiraz Cabernet today. Don't have tomato puree, so I'm using ketchup again. Some strong flour for the beef. Some chicken stock. Chicken stock being the neutral flavour. I don't want it too strong. I've got some mixed veg I'll chuck in there as well. Nice funny bag time. Over here I've got some beef suet, self-raising flour and salt. I'm going to add water to that and turn that into dumplings. Going to have dumplings here, stew. Don't have white onions, I'm using red onion, some chopped garlic. I've got some chopped back bacon over there. That's going to add extra flavour. And I've got some lean diced beef. And that's all I need for my stew. I'm going to use some polenta. Instead of making rice today, I'm going to make polenta into a nice thick porridge, and that's going to soak up all the juices as well. Okay, so I've tipped my meat into a bowl. There's two ways we can do this. We can add flour later and try and make a roux out of it, or we can coat the meat in flour now. I'm going to use that method today. So quite a bit of flour, don't be shy. The more flour you use now, the more sauce you'll have later. So really coat that meat. It's also going to help brown it when we seal it off. That's looking good. Okay, so using my very big pot today, I'm going to be quite generous with the oil. So it's about 3 tablespoons in there. I may have to add a bit more oil later. And I want to make sure the oil is hot. Now I'm going to start with my bacon, my onions and my garlic. Take that out and then do my meat. The reason for that is I don't want the onions and garlic to stick to the residue in the bottom of the pan. So first things first, never cook in cold oil. So there you go, so you can see my oil's running nice and freely. So start with my bacon. This is for a nice sizzle. Now we don't want to burn this. Now this is just normal back bacon. I sometimes buy cooking bacon when I'm doing something like this. It's a lot cheaper, same flavour. It just means you just got a bit more chopping up to do. But if you're not lazy, then why not? Now you notice a lot of liquid at the bottom of this pan. That's the water coming out of the bacon. It's perfectly normal. With non-smoked bacon, they do cook it or they say they're resting in brine first. That's just the brine coming out. It's going to cook away. The salt will stay behind. It's perfectly normal. Don't worry about that. Okay, so most of that liquid is cooked away now. It's only some fat in there. So I'm going to add my onions and my garlic. I'm going to cook that all together until it's just cooked. Remember, this product is going to cook for at least 2 to 2.5 hours. So it doesn't matter if the onions are a little bit big because they will cook down. Right, so bacon's now nicely cooked. A lot of the fat is rendered down. The onions and garlic is nicely cooked. So I'm going to remove that from the pan and then I'll start with the beef. Okay, so all the onions and garlic and bacon's out, so a bit more oil. And remember, your basic roux is equal quantities of fat to flour. We've quite a bit of flour there, so this is just making up that fat now. So again, this has to be super hot. You don't want the meat to cook on a low heat. If it cooks on a low heat, it boils and becomes tough. You want to seal off at a high heat, you'll get a much better finish to it. If your pan is not very big, then go for sealing off the meat half at a time or third at a time. I've got a nice big pan, so I'm going full on. Oil's nice and hot, so without burning myself, hopefully. My heat is on full. I'm going to cook this until it's nice and brown. The more colour I get on the meat now, the more color I'll have onto my end product. The more colour I get on my meat now, the more flavour I'm going to have on my end product. So it's really worth taking a little bit extra and getting this right. Now quite often people will stop at this stage, but if you look really closely, it's only starting to colour, so you want to get more colour than that. The whole idea is that as you seal the meat off, it contracts, sealing all the nutrients, all the flavour, all the goodness. Once it simmers at a lower temperature, it then releases and becomes softer and more tender, and thus you have a softer piece of meat later. So that's nice and brown. I've taken it away from the heat. Now in this pan I've turned my heat down to a low setting, so I don't want to burn it. You'll see there's still sediment in the pan, that's good. Now this is where I would normally add my tomato puree, which I don't have, so I'm going to get a little bit of ketchup. This is going to add flavour, but will also add a bit of a thickening agent. So just start loosening this up. Now everything that sticks to the base of the pan, that's flavour. You don't want to lose that at all. So now I've got that done. There's some red wine. Now I can add all my red wine at one go here because it's not going to make any lumps because the flour's on the meat now. So just a little bit of red wine. That's about half a bottle. Now I have to cook this out until it's totally gone. If I don't, this will taste vinegary and your whole product is absolutely ruined. But with the wine, I'm still going to remove all that sediment. It's called deglazing the pan. The tomato is essentially cooking out. The reason I can afford to use tomato juice is because the tomato juice has got a lot of vinegar in it. The vinegar is going to help break down the meat as well, rendering it more tender. So this is going to cook down now until it's almost finished. Okay, so looking at the liquid now, we've turned down to lose the steam. Looking at the size of the bubble, it's starting to make rather big bubbles. That gives you a bit of an indication that the sugars are now starting to not become syrup, but getting close. You can smell it. That acidic smell is gone. So now I can continue with the actual finishing of the first part of the stew. So I can add all my meat, juices and all. Don't be shy. So there's nicely coated in there. That bit of flour that's still on the meat is now going to thicken this mixture up totally, as you can see. I'm going to add my bacon, onions and garlic. Get all in there. Get a little bit of oil again, like I said, it's not a problem. It's going to incorporate with the flour. Now this is a massive pot of stew. I'm making enough for 2 meals, not one. So sometimes if you're making a product that takes 2 to 3 hours to make, it's worth doing that to save yourself some time. If you look at that consistency there, I could serve the stew at that consistency, but it's not going to cook without liquid. So I do have to add stock throughout the cooking process. So I've got some chicken stock here. And again, I'm just going to add a little at a time. And I just want enough liquid for the meat to start soaking in there. If I run out of chicken stock, like I said, with 2 stock cubes in there to only 1 litre of water, the stock is quite strong as it is. If I add too much chicken stock, it's going to overpower the dish. So once the stock is finished, I'm going to add water in its place. So that consistency there, where it's just covering the meat, you want to keep it like that for the next at least 90 minutes to 2 hours. So over to the dumplings. If I shake it out a bit, you can see there's the little stringy bits there. That's beef suet, which is basically fat. You can also get vegetable suet, so you can have vegetable dumplings if you want. So what I'm going to do is, I've got my suet in there, I've got my self-raising flour, that's going to make it nice and light, and I've got salt in there. Measurements, this particular measurement is 100 grams of suet, 200 grams of self-raising flour, 10 grams of salt, and then we just add a bit of water at a time, just to make little dough balls. I tend to start with just 2 fingers or with a spoon. I will need a bit of floured hands later to roll the balls, but for now this will do. Always start with dry first. It's easy to add flour. Trying to get rid of water away becomes a bit of a nightmare. So there we go, put more water. If you make these too heavy, the product itself is going to struggle to pick up the liquid. If you make it too light, it's just going to cook away in the liquid. So you really have to get a nice dough consistency. Talking about suet, if you're going to make suet puddings, it's like steak puddings or whatever, you can do a similar thing, but not using self-raising flour. But consider putting something like horseradish in your mixture to go with the steak pudding. The paste itself adds amazing flavour. Beef and horseradish, obviously it's a marriage made in heaven. Right, so if you look at that now, it's a nice little dough. It's just very slightly sticky. Now technically speaking I should use floured hands, but it's doing the job, so I'm going to make little walnut sized pieces. I will stick this up on a floured surface later, as soon as I'm finished. Make sure it's properly rolled. And then that will cook for minimum 20 to 30 minutes in the pot towards the end of the cooking process. Okay, so I've made these all different shapes and sizes, or not shapes, but sizes. Some like it big, some like it small. Because of the flour, it's going to add a thickening agent to the product as well. But also what I have to consider is at what stage do I add things to my stew. If you do not have suet, I have used grated frozen butter in its place before. It's not as good, but it does do the job. There are also recipes for just self-raising flour and water as well, just with a little bit of butter. Come making breadcrumbs and thickening up, but suet will always be your best. So my stew's been cooking now for about 40 minutes in total. And as you see, it is need to remove some of the scum from the top, so I'm just going to skim it off. And you should be skimming your stew all day. So I'm just using a serving spoon. In the trade I'll have a lot more stew, so I'll be using probably a soup ladle instead. So once I've got a lot of that off, I'll be skimming all day, so don't worry if you don't get all of it off now. A little trick as well, if you move your heat to one area of the stove, all the fat will move to the other side. So, be careful not to take too much juice. You really only just want the scum like that. This will be part of your quality points in a good stew for level 1s. Okay, so while that's cooking now as well, I'm going to add my potatoes. Like I said, at that size, potatoes probably going to take anything from 40 minutes to an hour. It doesn't matter if the potatoes break up because it's in the sauce anyway. And give that a bit of a stir. Back onto the heat. I'm also going to add my veg. I'm just adding frozen veg today. Normally I'd add a mirepoix, so onions, garlic, which is already in there. I'd add some carrots, some leek, and some celery. So I don't have that today, so instead I've got some sweet corn, peas, and carrots. This is frozen, so it's going to bring the temperature down. But again, it doesn't matter if it overcooks slightly. It's all just going to be in the product itself. So this is one of those just chuck in and let it cook. Products that will make this better. I love pulled barley in here, makes it most amazing flavour. I love your Scotch broth mix, really nice. Best if you soak it overnight in the fridge, but that takes a long time to cook. But in a stew like this, 2.5 hours, beautiful. You can add beans as well if you want, something like haricot beans. Again, it takes a long time to cook, but comes out beautiful. If you were to make this a vegetarian option, you wouldn't go through the whole process of sealing the meat off. You wouldn't put the bacon in or the chicken stock, but you could use chickpeas. You can add butternut towards the end, cauliflower florets, broccoli florets, anything like that that's not going to fall apart too quickly. Swedes, great, carrots. So that could be a vegetarian option. Okay, so this has been ticking over now for a bit. The potatoes are just under half cooked, I'd say. So I'm going to add my dumplings. And space them nice and far apart, because it's going to rise. When there's self-raising flour in there. And you've got a baker's dozen. So that now, I'm just going to slightly dunk it in the juice, and I will turn this occasionally. Bear in mind, I still need to stir this occasionally and add some liquid to it. But that's going to further thicken the soup as well. But this, I'm going to let it cook for at least 20 to 30 minutes because I made them quite big. They need a little bit longer. And I'm also going to add a lid to my stew now. I very seldom cook with a lid. I like to keep an eye on the food. But I'll put a lid on now. And that's going to help it rise as well. It will help the stew cook a bit faster as well. It's been about 2 hours in total now. Look at those dumplings. Let me fish one out there for you. You can see it's more than doubled in size. It's looking beautiful. So just again, I've been stirring this all day. I've been adding liquid as I need it. Being very careful not to break it up. Check my potato. That's nice and soft. That's cooked. I know the veg is cooked because it's nice and small anyway. So nothing sticking to the bottom. I've been very careful not to break up the dumplings. So now I can start with my polenta. Okay, so this recipe says you should have 176 grams, so we're going to double that. So that's how much?
376.
376. This is going to make a nice thick porridge. Okay, close enough. And water, it says you should have where's the water? 850, so we're going to double that, so that's 170. Oh, I've got a bit over. We need some salt in there. So I'm going to add about 20 grams of salt. Seems like a lot, but Polenta definitely needs salt. And so the recipe literally says, bring to a boil, stirring occasionally, and then simmer for 10 minutes. Until it's nice and thick. So we shall do that, and I'll show you the end result. Okay, so most of the liquid seems to have now incorporated into the polenta. You're going to mix it often because you don't want it to go lumpy. If it does go lumpy, you can use a whisk for this. But now that this is starting to come up to the boil, see, if I leave that now, it's going to start boiling. There we go. So I'm going to drop it down to a simmer and stir this occasionally until it thickens up to a thick porridge. I'll then finish up with butter and adjust the seasoning. While that's happening, I'm going to be adjusting the seasoning on my stew. So remember, there is salt in there already from the bacon, so I'm going to taste before I start seasoning. As you can see, this is really getting nice and thick now. It's a nice thick porridge. I want it quite thick because I want that to be able to soak up the juices, the polenta to soak up the stew's juices. So that's looking nice now. Now we start tasting. So it doesn't need any salt. In fact, I could probably go a touch less if I wanted to, but definitely a bit of pepper. Polenta loves pepper. Now you could finish this with some Parmesan cheese as well, which really adds a lovely dimension to it. But I'm not going to bother today. So while that's busy thickening up, I'm going to check the seasoning of my stew. Just a little bit of salt still there. I have added a little salt already, so don't add too much. do one final stir. Bear in mind I'm being very careful not to break up my dumplings. Don't let my polenta burn. Look how thick that's now becoming. That's beautiful. So the other day I spoke about the cornmeal. I used the white cornmeal. I made a nice thick dry crumbly porridge. Today I've gone different. I've gone for a thick, almost a mash consistency. So this is just an alternative to mash basically. It's a stew and mash as opposed to rice. You see how it's starting to stand on top of each other? On the top of itself, that is kind of the consistency you're looking for. So you can finish with a little bit of butter. Just 3 small knobs. And that's just going to make it nice and creamy as well. You could, if you want to be fancy, get some chopped herbs in here as well. Something parsley goes really well. Polenta and chili works really well together as well. And as you can see there, that got a nice beautiful shine to it now as well. Consistency of mashed potato. You can shape it, and that, I'll show the end product on the plate. And that is the end product. 2 dumplings, bit of polenta mash and stew. I'm definitely going to enjoy that.